And just real quick, a reminder about AC Martin. We're the oldest firm in the state, second oldest in the country. We've designed over 60,000 housing units across California, and our headquarters is here in Los Angeles. And again, I'm going to let the Irvine folks introduce themselves. They're a great team, and like I said, we're super excited to have them share their knowledge with us.
Thanks, Gilbert, and thanks for the introduction. Happy Leap Day, everybody. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share the lunch hour with all of you. At Irvine Associates, while we focus on anything that is land use related, we do pride ourselves as being housing advocates and are constantly scouring the code for opportunities to streamline the production of housing. Our services include land use feasibility, entitlement preparation and processing, and building permit expediting. We're mainly focused in Los Angeles, but we have branched out to service other jurisdictions throughout the state of California. Can we go to the next slide? So I myself will be covering for today's presentation a list of the housing bills that came online this year and some in the past. Tim Moran, Principal Project Manager at our firm, will be covering San Francisco and Los Angeles, and Tanner, the planner, Blackman, will be covering San Diego. And let's go to the next slide. Okay, so something that I think that it's important to recognize is that there's been a lot of activity at the state level in recent years related to housing. Obviously, local jurisdictions are not doing enough to reduce the red tape when it relates to housing production. And every year, there seems to be a new package of state law that impacts housing development in a positive way. And 2023 was no exception to that. There were 56 new state and assembly bills signed into law that were directly related to the production of housing. It's 56 bills. And our clients and architectural friends are constantly asking us about new housing law and how that might impact their projects or prospective projects moving into the next year. So thanks to AC Martin for giving us this platform today. We've pulled just a handful of those new laws that we think are going to be most impactful with development moving into this year. And apologies in advance, I'm gonna run through these relatively quickly since we're limited on time today and we have a lot of grounds to cover. If you have any questions, feel free, while I'm running through this, feel free to write them into the chat section, and our team will try to respond to you there, or we can try to cover your questions in the Q&A at the end of the presentation. Let's jump into it. Okay, so starting off with Assembly Bill 1449, this came online this year, January 1st, and it goes until January of 2023. This provides a CEQA exemption for affordable housing projects. You have to be 100% affordable in order to utilize this, and there are location requirements that also apply. So for example, you have to be in an urbanized area, urban cluster, or a half mile of a major transit stop, or high quality transit corridor. The thing I found interesting about this bill in particular is it has a proximal, and I put that in quotes, requirement to 6 or more of several standards. One, and just to list them out quickly, is a half mile of a bus station or a ferry terminal, within 1 mile of a grocery store, public park, community center, pharmacy, medical clinic or hospital, public library, or an elementary school, anywhere between kindergarten through 12th grade. Chances are, if you're utilizing this bill, you're 100% affordable housing developer, you're using this in an area that's already urbanized, it's already in a jurisdiction, so you're probably going to qualify from a location standpoint. This bill also does have labor requirements for any project that is 50 or more residential units. And it does not have the coastal savings clause incorporated in it, so you should be able to use it within the coastal zone as well. For any properties that do not permit multifamily and you want to use this, in those circumstances, it has adopted standards that are similar to AB 2011 or SB 6, as I'll cover a little further down. Let's go to the next slide. Assembly Bill 1490. This is the adaptive reuse for affordable housing projects, another affordable housing bill. I think that this is the first adaptive reuse statewide. which is very exciting. This is effective in July, and it does provide the ability to adaptively reuse existing qualified commercial buildings to residential uses for lower income households. Something that I really like about this law is that it requires local jurisdictions to include an affordable adaptive reuse as an eligible project for affordable housing funding. So hopefully that opens up the doors for this to actually be utilized. I know the pandemic has hit the office market really hard, right? There's a lot of vacancy out there. I saw an article today about how people are speculating whether or not we're actually at the bottom of the office market. But the adaptive reuse program, people are looking how to repurpose buildings, and the adaptive reuse program in Los Angeles has been around for some time and actually helped to revitalize Los Angeles. So I'm really excited to see this bill and the prospect that this bill has for building more affordable housing throughout the state. Let's move on. Oh, sorry, going back to that bill, there was another assembly bill that I wanted to mention, that there is another a study. It was Assembly Bill 529 that basically instructed HCD to convene a working group to study adaptive reuse just in general throughout the state, and how they can support those types of projects as well. So that's not going to come back until the end of next year, but we're following that one as well. Okay, sorry, now let's go to the next slide. AB 1287, this bill is probably one of my most favorite bills that has come out of last session. This bill is a straight up density bonus, the density bonus law. It's effective already, and it does some really cool things. One is it applies a double density bonus to your project, and I'll walk through an example in a minute. I know that there's also some discussion going on in social media. People have asked me about on whether or not you can actually activate a triple density bonus, but that's kind of yet to be tested. I do, this bill was passed and processed as a double density bonus. So like I said, we'll walk through that in a minute. It redefines or updated, I should say, the definition for maximum allowable residential density, or otherwise known as base density. And then it also added a fourth density bonus incentive for mixed income projects that set aside 16% at a minimum of very low income units, or added a fifth density bonus incentive for 100% affordable housing projects. It also opened up the moderate income category for rental units for that double density bonus option. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so I mentioned how it updated the definition for maximum allowable residential density. Just a little bit of history behind that. Last year, Assembly Bill 2334 came through and actually updated this definition previously, but it left this sentence in there that said, if a density allowed under the zoning ordinance is inconsistent with the density allowed under the land use element or general plan or specific plan, then the greater shall prevail. So jurisdictions were looking at that as requiring an inconsistency, right? So you had to have some sort of inconsistency between there. And if you had, a corresponding zone that was in line with your zone and your land use plan, then you couldn't use this, right? So this assembly came in, just took that sentence out entirely and just said whatever's greater shall prevail. So you get the zoning, the specific plan, or the land use designation, and whatever creates the greatest amount of density wins, as long as you're using density bonus. Let's go to the next slide. So here's an example of a site. Last year when AB 2334 came around, we did a study and we mapped the entire city of Los Angeles, and we looked for opportunity sites where there was a discrepancy between the zoning and the land use designation or specific plan. This particular site stood out to me, so I thought I'd bring it here to you guys today. This is a property in, I think, Silver Lake. It's almost an acre. The zoning on the left-hand side of the screen is R3, which permits a density of a lot area of 800 square feet of lot area per unit. And on the right, you can see the land use designation doesn't even correspond to that. It's a community commercial, which has a corresponding zone that creates the highest amount of density of C2. And C2 is in line with the R4 zone. So that's 400 square feet of lot area per unit. In the table on the right, you can see how that actually plays out in numbers. So if you're doing this as a straight up by right project without any entitlements, the most you can do is 51 units on this site, right? But you activate density bonus, you activate 1287, and right off the bat, you get to double your density on your site. Then, because that is your base that you establish your density bonus off of, you can then apply a density bonus to that. And in the city of Los Angeles, you're limited to 35% as your initial density bonus increase. In other jurisdictions, it's 50%, right? But in LA, you get to move up to 137 units. And then you can apply the double density bonus to that. And now you're looking at 188 units on this site. So just by activating density bonus on the site, you've more than tripled your permitted density right off the bat. The set aside requirement is minimal compared to LA's conditional use permit process. And ironically, that conditional use permit process and the TOC ordinance or guidelines are the reason why LA is limited to 35% instead of 50%. But if you were to go through that process, in comparison, you would have to do a conditional use permit to the City Planning Commission as an entitlement, and that requires a minimum of 2 public hearings, right? One in front of a hearing officer's hearing, and then another in front of the City Planning Commission. That's, if you're not going expedited, that's a year process easily to process your entitlement. And you would also have to set aside about 33 units as very low income units, right? So this Assembly bill really has, I think, is going to be very impactful. We're already looking at basically every single project that we look at that's going to incorporate some type of density bonus. We have to consider the zoning specific plan or land use designation when we're considering the density, because it's required, right? You don't have a choice in the circumstance. You have to consider that. And the local jurisdiction does as well. Let's move on to the next slide. SB4, yes, in God's backyard. Thank God for this bill. I'm really excited about this one as well. You'll probably hear me say that a lot in this presentation. This bill it provides a streamlined approval process for affordable housing development. It has to be 100% affordable housing on properties that are owned on or before January 1st, 2024 by a faith-based or higher education organization. Right. So there's, like the office market, the religious institutions have taken a hit as well as a result of the pandemic. There's a lot of membership. We've gotten a lot of calls from people that have membership issues with their organizations, and they're sitting on a lot of property. There's a series of eligibility standards in order to activate this bill. And we look at those in-house. We look at, anytime we're looking at a property to consider this bill, we'll do an eligibility check is one of the first things that we do. Chances are, if you're in an urban area, if you're in a city, you're probably going to qualify, but it does come at a cost, right? In order to utilize it, there's a prevailing wage requirement if you're more than 10 units. So union labor, right, for construction, the eligibility standards. And then if you have any existing historic buildings on your property, you can't touch those at all, right? If you have any existing residential units that have been rented within the last 10 years, you can't touch those buildings either, right? So just be careful as you're looking through these properties. You want to do that eligibility check. If you can activate it, if you can use this, it's super impactful. You can get away with a streamlined, ministerial, no discretion project by utilizing this bill for 100% affordable housing. All right, let's move on. SB 423. So this bill essentially took what was previously SB 35 and updated it. So this bill is the streamlined housing approvals for mixed income projects. I say mixed income. A lot of these housing bills, they require 100% affordable in order to get a streamlined process. But this one, you only, in quotes, have to set aside 50% of your base density as low income, right? So as long as you do that, and then you have a whole series, again, of eligibility standards, then you get a streamlined ministerial process for your project. There's no CEQA required for this project either. But a couple of things that this bill did to build upon SB 35. One is that it requires a public meeting to be held by the city council or county supervisors prior to your application submittal if you meet if you're located in a certain area of a jurisdiction. And then it also, if we can go to the next slide, it also opened up SB 35 to be applied, the streamlined ministerial approval process to be applied within the coastal zone. And I put limited on there because, this bill, we were following it last year and it was sailed through the Senate and it was sailing through the Assembly. And then I think it was the Natural Resources Commission or committee, and then Coastal came and pushed a whole series of limitations on its applicability in the coastal zone. So I listed that as a table there. As long as you qualify for the eligibility under the coastal zone, then you can use this. You can use this bill as a streamlined process. So I think probably a lot of areas within the state of California, if you're within the coastal zone, there's a certified coastal plan, so you should be able to use this. But make sure to do that check to see if you can actually qualify to apply this within the coastal zone. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, SB 684. Really like this bill as well. This is the a statewide. Basically took the small lot ordinance in the city of Los Angeles and applied it statewide. It was originally being processed to include applicability on single family lots, but that was stripped away. So now it's limited to multifamily zone properties. It does allow for the ministerial approval for a multifamily zone lot that's qualifying to be subdivided into 10 or fewer lots. Right. And so there's some limitation. Your site has to be less than 5 acres. There's a really, really, really small lot size minimum standard of 600 square feet. And there's a not floor area, but average habitable floor space limitation of 1,750 square feet. Now, keep in mind, this isn't effective until July of this year. So you can't use it yet, but if you have a property that's zoned even R2, a single a two-family dwelling zoned lot, that's considered multifamily. There's a lot of properties that are lower density multifamily properties that you can utilize this on. Some of the catches on this, or I should say probably the biggest catch, is just that if you have an existing unit that has been rented, then you cannot demolish that unit or even alter that building. So chances are you're going to find a lot of properties, multifamily properties, that do have an existing unit on that property. So you'll have to figure out on the rest of the lot how to split it. Let's move on. Next slide. Okay, so that covers all of 2024 that we're talking about, at least today. So let's jump into laws that have already existed that we are anticipating to continue to utilize. SB 35, I already kind of covered in SB 423, but we've used SB 35. It's been around since 2017. We have used this on a lot of projects in the city of Los Angeles and throughout the state. This bill, it cannot be used if you have any existing rental units on your property within the past 10 years. It also was not applicable in the coastal zone, but it does, it's at now SB 423. So now you can use it in the coastal zone, and it provides that streamlined ministerial process. So there's an eligibility check, which we will, like I said, we will do in-house to check that property. Let's move on to the next one. AB 2162. So this bill we have used in the past, not so much in recent years, because there's more options now to streamline the production of housing. So this bill can be used if you do have existing units on your property. You can actually activate this bill, but you have to provide it's 100% affordable housing, and a portion of that has to be for actual supportive services. So you have to set aside a portion of your building for supportive services, and show that you have funding to maintain that supportive services as well. Sometimes that comes with prevailing wage requirement. But no CEQA would be required. Okay, AB 2011. I love this bill so much. If you know me, you've probably heard me talk about this, and you're probably sick of hearing me talking about this bill. This bill is the Affordable Housing and High Roads Jobs Act of 2022. This allows for streamlined ministerial approval of residential development in zones where office, retail, or parking are principally permitted uses. And what that means is that you can have one of those uses be permitted on your property without requiring a conditional use permit, right? So in the past, if you had that situation, you had to go to other means of entitlement, which could include zone changes or general plan amendments, long drawn out processes. Now, if your property qualifies, you can activate AB 2011 to streamline the approval process of your project. And it's amazing because you can also use streamline subdivision, right? So you can then split up your lot, you can add condos. All of that is included within that streamlined ministerial umbrella of AB 2011. Now, again, this comes with an exhaustive list of eligibility standards. So it kind of builds upon the standards required by SB 35 and adds some more. It also has that provision if you have any existing units on your property, you can't utilize it. But something that it specifically excluded is a disqualification if you are within the coastal zone, right? So this assembly bill was passed and championed in order to be applicable in the coastal zone. Hasn't been, I don't think it has been tested yet, but that's something I think that's worth noting. The requirement for affordable on this site, there is 100% affordable option that you can activate, but for our mixed income housing friends, the minimum standard for affordability are two options. One is 8% very low income, plus an additional 5% as extremely low income, or you can just set aside 15% as low income for your project. So it's kind of like SB 35 with a less of a requirement for affordable. You still have to do prevailing wage in order to activate this, but you can use this up to 20 acres for a site that's up to 20 acres, and you can put a lot of housing. Density bonus incentives and waivers are also permitted within this bill to be used in conjunction. So I'm really excited about this. We're working on several opportunities, several applications throughout the state utilizing this bill. Let's go on to the next slide. Oh, okay. SB 6, I threw this in here because it was kind of a companion bill to AB 2011, except this bill actually requires CEQA. And so I don't really see this as being as beneficial. I think it has some less eligibility standards, but at the same time, I see AB 2011 as being utilized a lot more. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, AB 2334, I mentioned this briefly in the AB 1287 slide. So this came through last year. This did a couple of things. One was change that definition of maximal allowable residential density, but it also opened up more opportunities for 100% affordable housing projects to have unlimited density. And that's because the prior bill, AB 1763, if you want to use 100 unlimited density, the unlimited density provision, then you had to be within a half mile of a major transit stop. And that can be challenging sometimes in order to have, two buses having 15-minute headways. So this expanded that to cover areas that are very low vehicle travel areas as well. So it's a much more vast area that this covers and does open the door for a lot more production of affordable housing. Another thing that this continued was increasing the ability for your just base incentives to be a height incentive of 3 stories or 33 feet. And as a result of AB 1287, now you have 5 density bonus incentives that you can add on to your project or your project application. So if you need that, reduction in a setback, or if you need some other type of incentive like reduced open space in order to accommodate your project, you now have that ability to request that density bonus, that additional density bonus incentive to get your project through. Let's go to the next slide. SB 330 and SB 8. So I should have added AB 1218 on here too. So this SB 330 was the Housing Crisis Act of 2019. This has been around, and I think it's pretty well known. But just as a quick summary, it provided the no net loss provision within jurisdictions. So it prohibits local jurisdictions from implementing new laws that would lower the density of an area. It also, as a result of SB 8 and AB 1218 now, you also cannot come onto a property that has an existing residential unit that's protected and remove that unit from the market. You can't even do that with a commercial unit now, a commercial project. So you can't demolish that unit and put in a commercial project altogether. It has a no net loss provision. So you have to actually replace those units. So now in local jurisdictions, you got to work with housing to get a replacement unit determination to figure out if you need to incorporate that unit into your project, and also if that unit has to come back as affordable or not. It's an analysis that has to be done. But something that this did fantastically was that it provided an optional vesting option for projects, for development projects. So you have to submit it prior to your application, but you can come in now, and just like you would receive vesting rights for a tract map, you can come in and utilize SB 330 to get those vesting rights for your project. And that locks you into the standards and policies and ordinances and laws and rules that apply at the date that that application is paid for and accepted by the city. So we're doing SB 330 vesting applications on every single project that's a housing development project that's moving forward. And I would recommend for all of you all to do the same thing as you're processing projects. Let's move on. AB 2097. This is another, I think, very exciting bill that came out from last year. This prohibits local jurisdictions from imposing or enforcing parking minimum requirements for any commercial or residential development that's within a half mile of a major transit stop, with the exception of hotels, right? It doesn't apply for hotels. But you can take an existing building, even if it's commercial, and you can actually go back in time and remove the parking requirement. So, I know a lot of our commercial friends have parking requirements that might be costing them extra expense that they don't need. Maybe they're paying for it offsite, or if they have, it's taking up space that's being unused within their building. Now you have an option to remove that parking at least as being required as a result of your project from your building. And as we're looking at new projects moving forward, this has been super impactful on projects because with required parking, you also get required standards, like differences between compact and standard parking sizes and whatnot. And so if you don't have actual required parking, you can have more flexibility with design in your garage. I will say though, that if you the other standards like bicycle parking or EV parking, those standards still do apply to any of the parking that you're actually, bike parking applies regardless if it's required, but EV standards is required to any of the parking that is being provided for the project. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is gonna be my final slide. Sorry, I know this is an exhaustive list here, but just to touch on SB 9, the Housing Opportunity and More Efficiency, otherwise known as the HOME Act. This came around in 2022. I look at SB 9 as kind of like the ADU law in its infancy. ADU, when it first came around, was not really that well known, and then it took a few years for it to really gain some traction, some updates to laws to open up flexibility. And now I think everybody in the country probably knows what an ADU is, and you don't have to explain what that actually means, right? So SB 9 kind of builds upon that. It works with single family zone properties specifically, and it allows for those, as long as it's a qualified property. You have to do another checklist, of course. But as long as it's a qualified property, you can do one of two things. You can split your lot, And there's certain dimensional standards and whatnot that apply, but you can split that lot into 2 lots and put up to 2 dwelling units on either lot. So now you have a single family zone that has moved into being a 4-unit property. Alternatively, you can go and do a straight to building permit on that same lot and do a duplex, right? And as long as the local jurisdiction permits it, because local jurisdictions are incorporating this law a little bit differently, depending on the jurisdiction, they can also allow the 2 ADUs to be incorporated or included on your lot. So now you have 4 units either way, and you don't have to go through the whole subdivision process. I understand, sometimes subdivision from a financial standpoint just makes more sense financially for your project. So really excited to see this new law, and how this law will transform single family zones and provide more housing and more opportunities for housing in this year and years to come. All right, I think that covers me. And Tanner, please take it away.
Phew, take a breath, Alex. Well done, sir. Thank you for that thorough and riveting overview of recent state housing laws. Your enthusiasm for land use policy is infectious, sir. I'm glad there's no quiz after. For the remainder of the session, before we turn to some Q&A, Tim and I are going to take a look at how the state's biggest cities have been implementing these recent housing mandates from the state. These cities are San Diego, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. I'm going to start down south with my hometown of San Diego, and then Tim will discuss San Francisco and LA. Pause on this image for just a second before we go to the next slide. The image of this train tracks in downtown San Diego is fitting, as San Diego's implementation of these laws focuses on what they call transit priority areas. TPAs essentially match the state definitions of major transit stops and high quality transit corridors, as you'll see in a moment. San Diego has recently completed a new $2 billion Blue Line light rail connecting UCSD to UTC, and UTC, a very jobs-rich area, to downtown. Next slide, please. In general, I would categorize much of San Diego's recent implementation of state housing laws as a little bit extra. One example not on the screen, since Alex just mentioned ADUs, is San Diego now allows many more ADUs to be built on a property than state law requires. That's both single family and multifamily. Similarly, as Alex discussed, many of the recent state housing laws provide extra benefits to 100% affordable housing developments. The state defines this as well, 100% of the total units, meaning base density and bonus units. If near transit, such density bonus projects may request unlimited density, 5 incentives, and up to 33 feet or 3 stories increase in height. In San Diego, projects may request the same benefits by only setting aside 100% of the base density units as affordable. So actually maybe a lot bit extra in that case. Next slide, please. So the most transformative, potentially, housing program in San Diego is the Complete Communities Housing Solutions program, first adopted in late 2020. It was essentially San Diego's effort to implement locally many of these state housing bills that required more density bonus incentives, especially near transit. So CCHS focuses on...
Yeah. So he confirmed that it's not necessary to be 100 gallon. And then when we put
transit priority areas, any parcel zoned for multifamily housing may request CCHS incentives, which include floor area ratios per this map ranging from 4:1 to 8:1 in most areas, with opportunities for bonuses even, less so in coastal areas, unlimited density, no parking, and a ministerial approval process under certain circumstances when the site is less than 20,000 square feet or the project itself is less than 100 feet in height. Additionally, there are fee waivers and et cetera. All of this is available for projects in San Diego if a project is just setting aside 45% of its base density as affordable at these levels: 15% very low income, 10% low income, and 15% moderate income. The goal there is to, target these various affordability levels in transit-rich areas. Next slide, please. So what does this program really look like on the ground? Here's an example project designed by our friends here at AC Martin in the very lovely University Heights neighborhood. You're looking at 199 units of very elegant density in an 8-story structure with a 6.5-to-1 FAR. The base density of this property is only 16 units. So the 199 units designed here represent a 1,200% increase in density. The developer can achieve this by setting aside only 8 units as affordable. The economics of this program are mind-blowing to me. I included these inset images on the left to show the scale of the surrounding neighborhood and how much of an increase this program represents in the historic zoning potential, in these CCHS projects. And it's a very lovely design by our friends here at AC Martin. Next slide, please. Quickly, here's a couple more projects in San Diego. These were 2 of the first to be built under the Complete Communities program: Sequoia by the Park and the Sasan. Sequoia is a 100-unit building with no parking when only 11 units at below market rate. The base density at that site was only 25 units, so this project represents a 400% density increase. The Sasan, the nice pink one there, delivers 54 units with only 5 units at below market rate. And again, no parking. The base density of only 9 units means that this was effectively a 600% density increase. I just want to stress that although 45% of base density sounds like a big affordable requirement, it is dwarfed by the upside potential of the additional density available in this program in San Diego. Next slide, please. One last note on the Complete Communities program before I pass the mic to Tim regarding San Diego's urban future and suburban past. One thing I actually quite love about this program is that since it incentivizes the smaller scale, more fine-grained urbanism because it affords the ministerial process on these smaller sites, so here are 3 projects that are currently under construction in the North Park neighborhood of San Diego. These projects are essentially 1 or 2 sort of standard single family size lots with these very tight vertical projects that would look quite at home in Tokyo. I'm excited for the future urban form of my hometown and a more dense and walkable city. Thank you. That's my part. Tim, please bring us home.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tanner. And thanks, Alex, for your presentation as well. So jumping into San Francisco in the Bay Area, where I'm located, and starting with San Francisco because this is a bit of a contrast to San Diego that Tanner just talked about. Jumping to the next slide. San Francisco has been a bit more sluggish in its implementation of some of these state laws and production of housing. 2023 was the weakest year for housing development in the last decade. There's a number of factors that go into that. Some of that is, bureaucratic red tape, and some of that comes down to economic factors. Just highlighting this area of the city here, we can see that there's significant height restrictions in certain portions of the city that have restricted development for a long time. Next slide, please. With that in mind, though, looking at 2024 and beyond, there is hope and there is signs of increased opportunity throughout the city. The city has released recent memos about SB 423, AB 2011, SB 4, which to me signals that they are going to start utilizing some of these bills or accepting applications on them with hopefully less of a fight than they have in the past. Additionally, there is a push to upzone portions of the city, especially in the northern and western parts of the city, like the Richmond and the Sunset. And these will actually increase height in areas that historically have been limited to 2 or 3 stories. And this range goes up from 65 feet to 300 feet. And this program is still under discussion. There's going to be a number of public hearings on this and informational meetings throughout the next year. So it's something that we're keeping an eye on for new opportunity areas. But they are targeting specific transit corridors in these areas of the city. Another thing to touch on in local code is there is planning section 315. This does provide certain incentives for 100% affordable projects or other qualifying affordable projects. Some of these are not necessarily as beneficial as using some of the state laws, but I will touch on a unique one, which is that there are streamlined provisions for educator housing, affordable housing that specifically targets educators. Personally, I think we should just pay educators a living wage, but that's a whole different discussion. But the city is targeting building at least 500 units of educator housing, and I think they've got almost 3 projects online so far, and they've reached half of that goal. Next slide, please. So just touch on an example project by AC Martin in the Bay Area. This one was actually in San Jose because examples in San Francisco are a little bit limited at the moment, but hopefully that'll change soon. This was 100% affordable project. Something notable about this one, the requirements in San Jose were a bit lax, and this project actually chose to go through CEQA instead of using some of the state legislation just to get around prevailing wage requirement. But yeah, the allowances in San Jose and Oakland and some other parts of the Bay Area are a lot more forgiving, and some of those areas like Oakland have been meeting or exceeding their housing goals. But again, there's hope for San Francisco moving forward. Next slide, please. So just a couple of examples of recent affordable housing projects, just showing some of the additional height and units that was able to be achieved here. Next slide, please. Okay, so finishing it off with Los Angeles, I think in contrast to San Diego and San Francisco, where San Diego has been a little bit extra and San Francisco has been a little bit more limited, LA's been pretty even in its application, and we've had the chance to work a lot with city planning, with HCD, with the state offices regarding implementation of a lot of these bills, and we've been able to test out a lot of these bills in Los Angeles specifically. Next slide, please. So just to touch on a couple of things here with Los Angeles. So again, we can get pretty creative in a lot of these jurisdictions in applying local programs in conjunction with state law. So a few things in LA that we've been using, density bonus, as long as you provide on-menu incentives, the city of Los Angeles has changed their application of this to make that process ministerial. In addition to that, in using some of these state laws, we can take advantage of the off-menu density bonus program to get density increase over 35% and also ask for incentives not on the menu of incentives or that exceed what's on the menu of incentives. And we've been able to use those ministerially by joining that with bills like AB 2011 or something else, SB 35, that provides for a streamlined process. So that's been extremely useful, and that came out of working with staff to get that interpretation to make sure that we could keep those projects ministerial. I'll touch briefly on TOC, transit-oriented communities. That's something I just wanted to mention. That was a very useful program, but I think with a lot of this implementation of state law, it's something that we really haven't used as much recently. And then I also want to touch on the Mayor's Emergency Declaration 1, ED1. That's been a very useful program for streamlining 100% affordable housing projects and taking advantage of things like the off-menu density bonus program. And that is in the process of actually being codified permanently with the city. Next slide, please. So just a quick example here in Los Angeles, this project 1734 Hudson was done at the existing Selby Hotel in Hollywood. This was a project that we did with AC Martin, and we were able to apply for this project under the ED1 program. And something to note about ED1 is that it's streamlined, but it's streamlined ahead of the other streamlined projects within the city. So you could be a streamlined project, but if you're ED1, you jump ahead of streamlined projects. So it's very useful in getting these projects done quickly. And this is an important project to mention. Looking at the existing Selby Hotel, it was a 2-story structure that was in a bit of disrepair, and getting this project approved added a significant amount of density. We did use the off-menu density bonus program. It's within a half-mile of transit, so this allowed for unlimited density, no parking requirements, and we were able to ask for pretty significant setback reductions and some reductions in open space. And this is really a project that probably wouldn't get through the process easily, if at all, based on its location. So the application of ED1 and these state bills really made this project not only possible, but very quick to get through the city. Next slide, please. So just to wrap up, I just did want to mention we've obviously covered a ton of state bills and we've looked at 3 big jurisdictions, but these state laws are statewide. And, besides San Diego, the Bay Area, Los Angeles, we've been applying these in smaller cities throughout the state and in unincorporated areas. So just to think holistically that all these bills are providing opportunities statewide. With that, I think I'm turning it back to Gilbert.
Yeah, we have a great job, everybody. That was a lot. So I'm glad we're going to be sharing this with everyone. It's a lot to absorb. But we did want to take a few minutes. If you have questions, you probably saw some popping up in the chat as the team was talking through. We'll take a couple moments. Add any questions you've got, and we'll go through those. And if there's no questions, and we'll wrap it up a little early. I'll give it a minute.
In the chat so far, Gilbert, there was a question about do these bills, or is there a bill that facilitates conversion of ground floor retail to residential? Tim popped in to add that AB 1490 provides adaptive reuse across the state, and that you can couple that, with other bills like AB 2011 that have provisions that allow affordable projects to waive certain ground floor commercial requirements. There was another question clarifying AB 2334 and when you get to open up that 100% affordable density. It is just within half-mile of transit and the low VMT areas, but the AB 2334 added the low VMT areas because before it was just sort of transit adjacent, and so that actually opened up quite a bit. Looks like there's some more coming in now. Oh,
yeah, and I could just mention on that, with the ground floor commercial, we have a project that we're using AB 2011 in order to waive that ground floor commercial requirement because it was not something that fit within the pro forma of 100% affordable project. So that is one that we're using currently, that for those projects, it does not require you to meet that ground floor commercial requirement. And then there's other reductions that you can take for other types of projects within that.
I think Alicia's question here is a great one for Alex to take on. What is the best cocktail of uses for density, knowing what you know? What is the most exciting? Like if you were to couple together these bills to your Frankenstein provisions that are going to get their perfect project, Alex, what are you putting
the perfect
together?
Project. Okay, so so like I said before, I think the 2 bills that I think I'm most excited about are AB 2011 and AB 1287. And I say that because AB 1287 does allow for that double density bonus, and it changed that definition of base density, right? So in the example that I provided, that tripled, I think it more than tripled the density of that site, right? And there is no prevailing wage requirement because it's just straight up density bonus, right? And you get and it also provides for the 4th incentive, the 4th density bonus incentive. So, if I were to pick one right now, I think just because of the success of density bonus throughout the years, AB 1287 is probably my favorite. And then shortly followed by 2011, because of the ability to go into a property that previously did not permit residential, and now you can come into that project, right? That same site, and ministerially process a new housing project with no CEQA. But
and as you mentioned, some of these programs like AB 2011, for example, has its own affordability requirement. So essentially any AB 2011 project qualifies for a certain amount of density bonus incentives sort of to begin with. So you need to be kind of looking holistically at how to put these bills together. And one thing to take away is double check your density calculations and assumptions, because you might be leaving units on the table if you're not recalculating right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Jonathan already answered Alex's question about ED1, and yes,
I would
it is
just
being
really
codified. Yeah.
Yeah, just to touch on that, with the codification of ED1, there are a few changes to ED1 that are being proposed as part of the actual codification. So it would limit some of the incentives. Previously with ED1 projects, coupling that with off-menu density bonus, we've been able to ask for things like, I mean, not that we typically ask for this, but you could ask for 100% reduction in open space, things like that. And they are clamping down on that a little bit to limit how much you can reduce open space and I believe setbacks. And there's a couple of other small tweaks to it. But other than that, yes, they are working on codifying it right now.
I see a question that has come from Juan Carlos. Can an owner start a process of legally requesting the tenants to move out of a property in order to qualify to some of these bills, or the fact that they are there disqualifies, the fact that they're there disqualifies you even if you remove them in the future? Look, these requirements for disqualifications for tenancy, it's a look back on the property. So even if you, I mean, if you're gonna redevelop the property, you're gonna have to probably Ellis the tenants anyway, which takes a while to process. But it's when housing looks at your property, they're going to be looking at your property over the past 10 years. So your property would be disqualified if you were to include that portion or that building as part of the project. Sorry, go ahead. Somebody talking? Okay. So something I wanted to just highlight, I don't know if you remember Tim's slide when he was in the city of LA, and it was covering TOC and then ED1, and there was a graph there, and that graph shows the amount of units and affordable units that have been approved over the past 10 years or so. And that number in last year was crazy. There were so many thousands of units that were approved as a result of the ED1, of the executive directive #1. And what that tells me, and that message to the development community is, hey, if you can free up the actual red tape and streamline development and make this process more certain, that you know exactly what you're going to get at the end of the day as a product, then people will start developing that product. And in this case, those are all 100% affordable housing projects, because you have to be for ED1. I do know that the city council in LA has instructed the city to study a streamlined process for mixed income projects as well. And I know we've covered a whole bunch of state bills, but from a local level, if there was an ability to streamline the process, just like there already is for ED1, I think the city and other local jurisdictions would see a lot more housing production.
Is there any upcoming legislation that you guys are particularly interested or looking forward to?
I think, Tanner, you probably can.
No, I mean, I was just going to note that the calendar, kind of the legislative calendar, just closed a week or two ago so we now know all of the bills that are kind of under consideration. Not that we know them, because there's a couple thousand, I think, or something. But they're making another go at it. 2560 is one I'm watching. They're making another go to clarify that density bonus trumps coastal. And so hopefully that's one that proceeds. That had been edited out of past bills in recent years as part of the process. Anything else jump into mind, Alex?
That was the one that I was thinking of. I mean, look, I think that's probably a platform for another call, another presentation.
We'll do one in a few months as the committee process shakes out a little bit. Then how about that?
The dust settles.
Another question popped up from Jeff.
Yep. Let's see. How do you deal with cities that have new design standards that they want you to abide with, as well as their own affordable housing numbers with SB 330? SB 330, especially the pre-application aspect of SB 330, I think one of the big things with that is that it vests your project against certain changes, and it also keeps you to only having to comply with objective written standards in place at the time that you actually submitted that SB 330 application. So I'm not entirely sure what you mean by new design standards, but I have had on some projects where we've submitted a project with an SB 330 pre-app in a jurisdiction that really didn't have much written down in the way of objective design standards. And once they figured that out, they released new objective design standards, and we were able to basically say, you know, hey, that's not applicable to this project. But yeah, it depends on when you submit your project. So if they have objective written standards in place at the time that you submit your pre-application to VEST, you know, you would be subject to those standards as long as they don't conflict with the state laws.
It looks like that is it for the questions. It looks like we've come up against the clock as well. So just a quick thank you again for everybody for joining us. Alex, I'm glad you took a couple long breaths in there. You were worrying me a little bit. Tanner and Tim, thanks a lot. Look forward to seeing a lot of you at SCAMF next week.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you. And feel free to contact us if you guys have any questions coming out of this meeting. Our email addresses are there on this slide, and happy to answer any questions anybody has. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.